well, I'm a coach, so I know best. No, you're a coach. You know enough. That's all it is. You know just enough to get them over the line. Because if you were the best, you'd probably be playing the sport still.
Welcome to the Upside Training Podcast, your number one fitness and performance resource in Switzerland. Today, I'm happy to welcome back S&C consultant and sprint coach, Sam Portland. Hey, Sam, how you doing, man?
Hey, man, I'm good. Good to be back. And like I said, not driving this time.
Not driving. So for everybody who didn't listen or watch the first one, go check it out on YouTube because there's the video and Sam's actually driving the whole time. But it's it's still a really good podcast, but we'll skip the presentation since you did that in the previous one, episode 44, for those who want to go check it out. What's been up? What's new in your world, Sam?
Oh, just like the ever-changing landscape with COVID and everything, like trying to, still work as best as possible. In that time as well, I did all the whole recruitment and the new mentorship program that we took public. That's now up and running and going into week 2, which was, amazing. Like the response I had when I announced it was, I had close to nearly 200 people to speak to across platforms. So to me, it just screamed out where the industry is in terms of developing and self-aware coaches. It was just a brilliant experience. And that has literally taken the last 3 weeks of my life speaking to nearly every one of them on the phone. So it's been amazing.
Yeah, let's start with that. Can you talk? We talked about it in the previous podcast at the end, but now it's rolling. Like you said, you're in week 2. So how are things going? What are you emphasizing this week, and what are you looking forward to doing moving forward with it?
Yeah, so it's brilliant. Like it's a really exciting time because the way I set it up is I have to speak to everyone on the phone because it's a group program as well. And after speaking to as many coaches as I could, it's like traditionally mentoring is seen as, someone sitting over your shoulder, watching what you do, critiquing what you do, whereas this obviously is a remote platform where the mentoring itself is actually hugely reflective. And, in the future, it will be going to like in-person stuff, but the actual true art of reflection and introspective thinking around not only coaching, but personal development, you spoke a lot about it before, is really opening up people. So like, it's crazy because no one knows, like I actually doubled my intake this time because of the reception I got. And so no one knows each other on the calls. And first session is like a huge disarming process where the lecture that they get, which they can watch in their own time, it's kind of like a 3-day sequence. So it's like a real condensed focus because I try and create like a big impact at the beginning of the week. And then the ripple for the rest of the week just keeps you going through. So the first one is that they've really, like, my first call is usually an hour with them. And like I get questioned and we do a lot of cool stuff. And then the second part, when they watch this first lecture, it's, a really good exercise about getting to know yourself and understanding what you really want. Like what makes you tick. Because some people, I spoke to loads of coaches, like some people, they want to coach team sports, but they're just not cut out to it. And that's fine. And that's okay because you're never going to coach everyone. And as soon as you understand that, you can have a massive acceptance shift and then move on. And then you can start getting focus because you'll end up creating these negative feedback loops. I can't get this job. I never get a job in team sports. And you've never applied for the job that you're suited for. And it's like, because we're shiny objects everywhere, we're following what people want to do. And so it's kind of, then they get thrown into this first call and it's like, well, tell me what came up. It's like, they have to then confront what they found and share it with a group of people they've never met before in their life. And it's just by the first half an hour of that first call is like, I'm just like, come on. I tell my story and share all my sort of dark secrets. And then by the end of it, it's like, that's it, time, guys, we got to go now. We got to go. Sorry, I'm cancelling the phone call now, because once it lifts, then they're just open. And so move forward. Week 2 is applied speed training and team sports, funnily enough, but applied team sports speed training. So we alternate week from week of personal development to applied strength and conditioning. So it's like, yeah, I'm buzzing for it.
I like it. That's a really interesting format to go from one to the other. To come back a little bit on that, coaching personalities, what does it take to be a coach, whether it's S&C or sports coach, with a team of athletes, of sports, practitioners, whether it's at the amateur level, at the pro level? What personalities do you see do well and maybe excel? And then what personality traits do you see that just don't jive well with that kind of world?
Well, it's really interesting, because I think they all work. I honestly do think they all work, but it's when the individual's trying to be something else. That's when they become their inauthentic self, because you can't keep that act up, and you then lose sight of actually what makes you tick. So then you underperform. And so like, there's a reason why, because coaching is really interesting. It's like such a big spectrum, and it's not even a continuum, it's 3D. And so, because if you think of the global term as coaching, it's not an understanding of just sets and reps. It's an application and a sophisticated human experience. And so when you have coaches that lose sight of that, and it's literally that we talk about being the engineer or the artist, and all the time. And so, but what makes successful, like I go all over the place, as you know, what makes that successful coach first is being authentic, is understanding your, not strengths and weaknesses, I don't like that, but understanding who you are, because there's only strength in that knowledge. And then you can go and apply what you apply well. The rest will just fall into a place, because athletes and anyone who's slightly self-aware, the biggest bullshit filters on. And if we look at the coaching in itself as a 3D experience, there's no reason why, if you look at like a presidential election in America, it's the ultimate almost I'm trying to think, cartoonist version of coaching, because it's mass coercion, where you look at the most beautiful form of coaching, which is praising your newborn child for sitting up for the first time. So that's how spectral coaching can be, and you're never going to be able to do everything. And so what works with all groups is everything. It's about knowing where you are in that, which allows you to do that. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. And I guess the flip side of this, of the knowing who you are as a coach, so you can then just execute what you have to while just being true to yourself. The other part is, like you said, dealing with other human beings. They're not just athletes, they're not just clients. And so the other part of that is listening, right? So
Yeah.
you have to listen to what's going on the other side. So I got a question for you on that. How do you listen, and how do you open up to, what the players have to say, what the athletes, what the people have to say, but without turning into a pushover and, letting yourself go into, oh, I'm just going to do what the athlete said. I'll give you a, practical situation in the club where I do the physical prep side of things. They were quite adamant at the beginning of this season about being open with players, about listening to players, about receiving feedback from players. But then I felt like there was still quite a bit of, well, we're asking for feedback, but then sometimes we'll just say, well, they can't just have what they want all the time, so we'll just do what we think is right. So how do you find that happy medium between, listening and then doing the right thing afterwards?
Well, that last thing's a really interesting point. It's a great example because all that is a challenge of ego. And so what it does, we can't give them everything they want. But why? Because by that scenario, we actually feel like we're losing power. It's a massive power statement. It's like, well, I'm a coach, so I know best. No, you're a coach. You know enough. That's all it is. You know just enough to get them over the line. Because if you were the best, you'd probably be playing the sport still. Or in your day, you would have been the best ever. So it's kind of like, that's where, from that last thing, and that's what you understand, it's actually just an ego attachment and egocentric people, which everyone is to a certain level. Like, it's about understanding how your ego gets in your way. So then if you take that right back to the beginning about not being a pushover, if we look at what a pushover is, it's someone who gets taken advantage of by someone who doesn't respect them to then do what they want to do to get where they want to go. So if we take it right the way back, if your first relationship development is completely authentic, then you're never going to be a pushover because you're always going to be respected. And the way that you generate respect with athletes, I believe, and you never become a pushover, is by being incredibly honest. And you have to be incredibly honest about your intentions. I mean, you can't control what people do. That's fine. The relationship will get to a point where that control is challenged, and then you make a decision. But the precursor before that is coming with openness, honesty, and giving respect rather than accepting and expecting respect. Because I've had conversations with athletes that go, what are we doing? And it's like, actually, I don't really know. Like, we're just figuring this out right now. Today, we're just figuring it out, and we got to work together. I've had the best progress with those people because we fail, and this is something that grinds my gears slightly, is we fail to really keep in our forefront of our mind that our profession only exists because people play the game. We're so dependent on those individuals, but yet we continue to undermine their own innate abilities.
Yeah, it's funny now that you say that. It brought to mind something that I've been doing with my private training clients for a while. Not necessarily as much with the rugby team that I work with or the other athletes that I work with, but it's a good reflection point. I always ask my clients when I start with them, what do you think you need to achieve your goals?
Yeah,
that's going to be the start of the program. They might say, oh, I want to lose fat, so I want to do crunches. I'll be okay, we'll do crunches.
Yeah.
And then we'll start with that, get buy-in, and then slowly educate them, and then show them that there's other things we can do, and here's how we do them, and here's why it's good, and here's why it might be better use of our time. But I've never actually done that in the context of a team, because I guess there is a big difference between talking to one person and then talking to 40. So how do you make that work with the whole team?
Well, I actually did it I was with a group of players on the touchline when I was at Ealing, and they were like, I think I talked to about this before, and they were like, oh, something about coaching. I said, do you know what? I became the best coach when I actually stopped caring. Because when I actually removed the fact that I have any real control over the outcome and accepted the fact that it's just a decent guess, everything else is easy. Everything else is so easy because you become process driven, you become field driven, you become this is what I liken to the artist, when you don't analyze because you're reacting, you're instinctive. And when those coaching experiences they're the ones that you remember, they're the sessions that you remember. And that comes from with a group of players. We'll talk about at the end, when I first sat down with the boys at Scottish, like, I said to him, it's like, my goal is to make you ready to play rugby. I don't really know how we're going to do that yet because I've never met you all. But this is my intention, and it's gonna be the best way that I think for you right now. And let's do it together. Let's not do it separate. Because I hate the identity that the S&C coach gets, because a lot of them ruin it for everyone else because they're not for the players.
And it's got to be from the SNC. It's got to be from everybody else too, right? The staff and the managers, everybody's at the service of the players, just like a CEO is actually there to do what they need for the employees to do their job as best as possible.
Yeah. Well, this is the thing. It's like your reputation will get you through the door, but your daily process keeps you there. And this is the thing, like, you ever thought about it, like why some managers keep their jobs but they don't win titles? Like, why more managers get time than others, and they don't actually achieve the ultimate? It's like, it's because they've got the dressing room, they've got the belief, they've got the respect. They know when it's, like, from an S&C point of view, like, they know there's times when you put the pedal down, but there's times when you take it off. And there's a couple of ways that you can use, it's really important to deliver to your athletes is to show them, if you monitor, make use of that data, demonstrate that you make a decision off that data. Otherwise they lose respect in the data and they lose respect in you. But then also pre-plan and forecast adaptation, because you can. So then you can say to them, right, you have these milestones of when I'm actually going to unload you, so please don't hold back. Like, I don't like keeping players in the dark about time off or what's coming up next. I've been in those situations all the time, and I think it's fucking terrible, because you treat them like children, they behave like children. And so, like, you then become, the relationships becomes disingenuous. So then when you're trying to get everyone on the same wavelength, yes, we're fighting archetypal ideals which are just driven from fear, but we all want to go in the same direction. And I put an Instagram thing up the other day. I was just talking to someone and I was like, well, let's be honest, sports science develops faster than technical coaches evolve, because this, like, technical coaching is generational. Sports science is, like, how long does it take to get a paper published? 6 months? Do you know what I mean? Like, generation versus 6 months. Just chill the fuck out. Focus on a few other different bits and pieces that will get you over the line more.
Yeah, I had a great experience with that this last summer with the guys talking about, not keeping them in the dark. It was half a product of COVID and then half a product of, I thought that might be a good idea. I wrote the preseason and then laid it out on a quick, keynote presentation, filmed it, sent it to everybody and said, this is why we're doing it. This is how we're progressing and why. And then we'll adjust along the way, obviously, if we have to. Do you have any questions? Did a Zoom call with questions. And the first day, we had 30, 35 guys show up. And throughout the whole preseason, we had between 30 and 40 guys, which is definitely a high from my memory and many players as well. And they just showed up and they knew what they were getting into and they knew what was expected of them. And then it was just kind of, just roll with it. Let's just fucking do the work. And there was no like 15 minutes of explaining and this is how it works. It was like, no, the sheet is printed out. It's in the changing rooms. Read it before you get on the pitch. And then you know exactly where and when, what's happening. And that actually, and I mean, we're an amateur team. We train twice a week. Most people have, all of them have day jobs and it still worked great. And the guys actually took something out of it at the end of the preseason, which I think is always a plus, because I mean, and that's probably the same in many places, but especially here, the old school, strength and conditioning in rugby is all about just banging your head against a brick until it bleeds. And then you bang a few more times just to make sure that you did enough. Trying to change that is tough.
I don't mean to interrupt you there, but it's a really interesting point, because I've done that process that you did with a part-time team whilst working with a full-time team at the same time. Right? The difference between the two is, well, I mean, from my coaching, I was trying it with a full-time team, but I was in charge of a part-time team. And the differences in those situations, you respect the fact that you don't have a lot of time with these people, because you don't, like, even though you may pay them a match fee or something like that, you don't provide their living. Whereas in a full-time environment, there is a certain level of ownership of the individual to do X, Y, Z. Do you know why? Because I pay your fucking bills. It's another power play. It's like, it's so, like, when you start thinking about these things, well, it's all just ego-driven power moves. But when you actually, if you would, and I was like, I worked at a club where on a Monday, 2 days post-game, the players would be in at 7 o'clock in the morning for breakfast. They wouldn't leave till 4 o'clock in the afternoon. They'd only do one weight session, one meeting, and one team session. That was it. From 7 till 4. Like, good way to start your week. Like, and do lower body game day +2. Cheers. Like, so from that point of view, it's just because you pay them, it doesn't mean you've got to keep them there. And I did some consulting with a football club, Premier League football club, and I was up there for a couple of days with them. Shout out Burnley Football Club. The guys there, Tom, Mark, bloody legends. Sean Dyche is a hero. Like, because they were just amazing. I couldn't speak highly of them. And it's not because Tom's got ginger hair like myself, but he, like they just got it right. They've just got it right about inspiring people. And he's one on guys, like, they got Burnley out of the Championship, brought them up. They're steady in the Premier League. And he values his players. Like, he values his players. Like, there's some really amazing things. I can't really name names or anything like that, but, you know, there's a player that he wasn't keeping on, but because he helped them get up, and there was it's sport, contracts change. It was like, you're training with us to keep right until you get a move, as long as it takes. Like, how that guy will feel so valued and so enriched by a very tough time. And then, but like on a Monday morning, every player, you wouldn't come in till later, so every player could take their kids to school and have breakfast with their families. Like, that is how you coach.
You have to,
coaching is life as well.
You have to know what's in it for the players. What is their end goal? Where do they want to go with it? And like you said, whether it's, oh, I just want to have a good time on the weekend, or, oh, I want to win a championship, or, oh, I want to move up and try to, play in a higher league. If you can have those honest conversations, it reminds me of, Gary Vaynerchuk. Yeah. He talks about that. How first thing you do with an employee is you sit down and you ask them where they want to go. What do they want to do? Have an honest conversation. And if you know where they want to go, then you know what you're going to have to do to help them. And that's going to be an honest relationship from the start. But if you're just trying to push your workload on someone who's got other aspirations, then why the fuck would they care about working for you?
Oh, exactly. And in strength and conditioning as well, that big fight for the bottom, which I was in for a long, long time, is that the people above will keep giving you more work to make you feel like you're progressing. And they'll just keep you where you are. Like, I can't wait for the day where I get enough expansion in my company and stuff that I hire people and they go, I want your job. Those are the people I want to work for me. And the real answer is that you can't have my job because you're not me. However, I can make you a shit ton of money and allow you to do it pretty much all on your own. That's what I want to give you. You want what I've created, not my job. And that's what you want to give to people. And it's the same if you're a director of rugby and you've got a group of players in front of you. Why buy a player in and then don't play him because he's not got your he doesn't fit your system. Well, you fucking scouted him. His physical qualities, and it's and then it underpins behind that there needs to be a better appraisal system when transferring talent. players should have responsibilities to individuals, because remember, it is all about the players. And we tie this S&C podcast, but we tie this back into the role of the S&C coach for that. They need to be understanding the metrics of where their athletes are. So when that athlete goes, you know, I've had conversations with players when they've left clubs. It's like, tell me what you need. I'll give you a packet. I can give you your numbers to your agent. So you know where you are, know your weekly volumes, know everything to help you, like your passport. It's not just like a sell and trade sort of scenario. And it gives me to one point actually about this. When I was working at a club, there was a guy that got injured, and I was doing the rehab at the time, amongst many other things, like I said, to make me feel like I was progressing. I was just tired. And I was like, so I sat down, had a meeting with him, and I was like, oh, what do you want to achieve? And there'd been whispers about him signing for another club and stuff like this. And I was like, mate, come on. 18 months from now, where are you playing rugby? And he was like, named the club. I was like, right, what shape do they want you to be in? X, Y, Z. Okay, that's the plan. My role is not to help you get back to train for this team, even though they employ me. My role is to help you get to where you want to be, irrespective. And that's what knowing where they want to be. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and that dovetails nicely into the next topic I wanted to touch on, which is the autonomy of the athletes that you work with. So on a day-to-day, weekly basis, how much autonomy do you give to the guys that you work with in regards to maybe all facets of the program, whether it's the warm-ups, content, exercise selection, all those things? How do you manage that?
So I can break this down like, so with my speed group, which is COVID, which is causing lots of problems with that. Like they just get taught the warm up. Like the core group know the warm up, and they just do it. And we have story time, like whilst the warm up's going on. Like, who's got a story this week? Like filthy sex story, or something stupid like that. Like, I was when I first started it, I was dating. I was in the dating scene, so I'd like come back and I'd have a date every week or whatever, and I'd tell the story of the date. So it all whilst warming up. So it's completely an autopilot part of the program. And if anyone new came into the program, I wouldn't coach them the warm up. The players would just, I'd be like, one of the main guys, James, would be like, JT, just take him through it, and he'd do it. Because it makes the environment incredibly relaxed. B, there's no competition apart from who can run the fastest or how much improvement they make, because all different shapes and sizes, and so then by getting another player to coach a player through their mental rehearsal, so everyone's doing it 3 times. And then by the time, they get onto all their drills and stuff like that, everything is, we'll use the same exercise in different ways, because we've got multiple people. So we'll use the same exercise. So for instance, like you may have seen, I do quite a lot of heavy banded first step stuff up against the wall with a stable support, because it's a big problem with team sport athletes is that first initial projection. They just really struggle to get that gait right. And so, so first of all, you boil it down, like what are team sport athletes really good at? Lifting weights in the gym. So therefore their force profile is more strength biased. So let's use a heavy band and reinforce that relationship with support, and then do it in pairs. And I barely do any coaching at that point as well. I just ask questions, and we don't change anything. And it's like, well, we'll just keep figuring it out. And then the goal is, so we set goal of the day. And then I'm just like rehashing my language. I'm going through these sessions. And it's like the goal of today is stiffness off first step. And just remember one of the last sessions we did, the goal of today is stiffness off first step, transference into second step with hard projection to third. go. What do we need to do? Boom, 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 boom. Sessions built. And different. So, but also for like someone who, you know, same exercise, different need, same that two hands on a wall, heavy band around the waist, split stance, hip projection. For one person, it could actually be like glute posterior chain strength. The other person, it could just be for ankle stiffness, or the other person, foot mobility, like, or the other person. So what people sometimes don't see with these drills is they think about the hip and getting to the end product, but what they don't see is the role of the stance foot, which has to negotiate the weight of the body. So it's the missing fulcrum. It's like David Gray, I was talking to him about, he's like, he put up loads of kickers. He works with GAA guys a lot. And he was like, the good kickers find their heel. I was like, yeah, there's the missing fulcrum that we don't understand, is the actual heel strike of that action, which lo and behold, loads of kickers get groin problems because they don't know how to force transfer and overload. So, but then if you look at that fulcrum of the actual ball of the foot versus the ground, we're looking at how effective that is. So there's multiple things that you can change. And if I know someone's like, if I want to, you know, we spend some time working it around the hip so we can sash it and put it over the shoulder to then see if the hip actually keeps doing what it's doing, and we take away the thing. So from that's how that builds. And then I mean, I'm coaching a free agent at the moment, and because it's very week by week, just waiting for workouts to get over to the States. So we know that on a Tuesday we're linear sprinting and lifting heavy enough in the gym. Like, we're fixing a few problems that he's had. And on Thursday we're specific drills and top up gym. So at the moment we don't actually have a program written. It is the most autonomous coaching I've ever done, because it's like, right, we know this is not quite where it needs to be. So let's just explore it. Let's just ask questions, keep loading. I tick some boxes. I know he's accelerated hard 5 to 10 times on different variants. It looks nice. It's moving, and we load him up. Like in a traditional, we can use like APRE with him, really. Like, you know, let's get you a 6, 7 out of 10 and let's crack on. Can you move it faster? No. Okay, let's make it heavier. Because today can't be speed, then it's going to be simple. And then like the long-term process, I mean, I had Alex from January to October this year, and that became pretty much painting by numbers at the end of it, because he peaked. We got him to where we needed him to be. He got there a little bit earlier, which was amazing, but then it was about, okay, can we then put capacity on this? Can we then, you know, and then it comes down to the questioning, like, how's your fucking body feeling, man? Like, you've just hit, what did he hit? Like, on one day, 6 sprints, like he broke 9.5 3 times, 9.7 twice, and a 9.9, like meters per second inside 40 meters. I was like, bro, how the fuck do you feel right now? He was like, I'm all right. Get him on the couch on the Tuesday, his hips are just like, it's like, because, you know, that's some serious load. And then we changed the day, and then we build the back end of the week. We knew that one day, like, if we could get him in on a Monday and we could find the most potent stimulus that we needed, then the rest was fine. Like, towards the end of our process, I'm not with him anymore. Towards the end of the process, it was like, well, if Monday's fucked, then we've got Tuesday, and then we've got Thursday. But we never do anything apart from bodybuilding on a Friday, because there's no point.
One of the main things I wanted to talk to you about today was actually just that, building a speed program. So if you were to take us through your process, and we could maybe do it with two two athletes on the spectrum, more of a beginner still learning how to run, how to put his feet in front of one or the other, and then working with a higher level athlete who already has all this dialed in, and you're just kind of fine tuning things. So where do you start? What's the first step to building a proper speed program for you? What's the first step to take?
First thing I do is I look at the athlete. I'll look at them. I'll be like, right, because ultimately you want short body, long legs. All right, that's what you really want. But team sports, you rarely get that. Alex was long body, long legs. Like he had a midsection like the size of a cooler, like so you look at the body, and then you can start making some educated guesses about actually what type of sprinter do we need to push this person towards being. So you have a pre-planned, preconceived idea. Like heaven forbid you get someone with a long shin and a short femur. Like that's your facts basically, because that's difficult.
Yeah.
That's really difficult. But it's not impossible. It's not impossible because everyone has the ability to get faster. Not everyone's going to win the 100 meters in the Olympics, but everyone has the ability to improve. And so the first part of it is like, right, what's our easy wins? Irrespective of an athlete's ability to sprint technically well, there's still always going to be skill acquisition flaws, because for every level of speed that's produced, a new skill error is revealed. And if anyone has trouble thinking about that, think Warren Gatlin against Usain Bolt in the 100-meter final. Like 4 steps from the end, he takes a full step, ruins the race. And is that skill? Well, potentially, because it's skill of handling the situation. So there's always room. There's always a skill element. And so from then, I literally will take it step one at a time, because sprinting is a domino effect. Linear sprinting is a consequential effect of collisions with the ground. So, like, if you think dominoes, right? They're all the same height, but think you're knocking down 20 dominoes, but they're getting heavier and bigger by the 20th. Like you're knocking over a domino the size of a computer screen, and the only way it's going to do it is if everything is stacked well. Is if that first one hits the second one, because everything's heavier and harder as you go through. So from that point of view, it's like team sport athletes. Question I'll ask is what do they look like when they're trying to get their weight in front of them? What do they look like when they're trying to find length out of the first step? And I just put them into different conditions because I need to know if athlete can get length before we can find speed. It's easier to put speed on projection than projection on speed.
Yeah, because maybe for as a practical example or sample of that, somebody who never fully extends, never finds that straight line. Kind of, we can debate about whether we want a full straight line, but you see what I mean? Ankle, hip, shoulder, and really, like you said, project. But somebody who stays folded and then spins their legs really quickly, like you said, that's harder to flip around than someone who can actually project, but maybe doesn't have the right timing, can't switch fast enough, spends a bit too much time in the air on that first projection. Is that what you're talking about? Okay.
Yeah, exactly. And I even go, with a beginner, so from the spectrum, from beginner, I'll be like, well, find that straight line for me, please. Find that straight line, because I want to see, because it's not about the straight line. That's just the cue. The effect is if we can get clearance. So from that, where that foot start, the stance leg, so it would be the front leg, where the front leg starts to get length, is there a split moment in time where it just moves forward and nothing happens? No change in the legs or anything like that. Does it just move forward? Take it from track and field. It's called block clearance. Do we get clearance? So for me to then say, use that cue, find that straight line, find the straight line, boom, everything shifts as one. All right, cool. Now, can you do it twice? Shift, shift, clear, clear, sweet. 2 steps. Then we start looking at the problem that we've got. Is our athlete pushing for too long to find length, or is their weight too far behind them? So it's kind of because we're looking for that pendulum. If the weight's too far, if they're pushing and finding clearance, but their weight isn't far enough in front of them to bring the leg back through, then it's still going to be too far behind them, so the leg will stay. Does that make sense? So we got that balancing act. So then it's like, okay, so then what do I need to do? You know, take them back on the drill, take them back on the wall. If we've got the first projection right, okay, so then let's load the hind leg through the ankle or the thigh, and let's get that leg smacking through with time. And then you can start building that relationship out, and you just increase specificity of exercise, and then specificity of sprint volume. Where at the beginning, like I did, one of my props, right? And this is how much I value skill acquisition early stages. When he came to see me, like he's 6', he's 120 kilos. Like we did A skips for an hour. Like people say, is that any use of his time? Yes, because he had DOMs for 3 days and he was blown out of his ass by the end of it. His physical preparation just wasn't there. And the whole time we were doing these A skips and stuff, but it was just about building the respect for the work and developing that relationship with his body, because he knew that he wasn't in sprint shape. And this is the problem where you get a lot of guys that pull up injured. They're not in sprint shape. And sprint shape just gets good. Like, can you perform a good sprint warm-up? If you can't perform a sprint warm-up, then you know where you are. Like Alex, the first time when he came to me back from an NFL season, the speed warm-up fucked him. It took him 40 minutes to get back into sprint shape. So it's not like I'm just picking on a prop. This is an NFL player. So, but then, lo and behold, 6 weeks later, this prop breaks 9 meters per second. Like, because it's the respect for the physical qualities and the skill of the load. So you've taken someone from one end of the spectrum to actually 9 meters per second at 120 kilos.
That's moving.
Like that's fast as fuck, right? And so that one athlete has gone from one end of the spectrum to the other end of the spectrum, and he hit like an 8.8 and a 9 in 10 minutes. So it's like he's produced it roughly twice, call it twice. So it's not a fluke. And so, go on.
Sorry, so you start with that projection because, like you said, I like the idea of the domino effect with the dominoes getting bigger and bigger. Because, like you said, if the first 2 steps are off, then everything is gonna pay down the line. Do you work from both ends of the spectrum in terms of working from that first step, but then also building on flies? And like you said, I mean, an A skip just quickly turns into some kind of intensive tempos, and then into some max velocity stuff. Is that the way you kind of go? You push at both ends?
Yeah. No, definitely. It's a density model.
Right.
So I just call it a density model where you want, at one end, you want to give an athlete the opportunity for as much time and space to find their fastest speed. Then, wherever that speed is, most team sports about 50 meters. Because you just condition it. Do it slowly, do it safely. Don't hurt yourself, right? And the one way to keep that in check is to say, keep your pelvis underneath you, because that's where you need them at the end anyway. And it's usually about 50 odd meters. And then over time, you're collecting data from your front end on how that's moving and where they're getting to within 8 or 9 steps, and you're just closing the gap. So like, this is random, like loose numbers off the top of my head. Alex 9.7, 55 meters the beginning of this year. Once, then to 9.9 inside 40 meters, like I said, over 9.5 6 times off walkbacks inside 40 meters. So that's how you pack it. And then so I always will look at acceleration, if I can, acceleration and max velocity on different days, because we need to teach the athletes a respect for both. And I hate hate's like a really bad word, but like it's just
there's so much of it in 2020. We got to get rid of the word.
Yeah. And I'm just passionate. It's not because I hate it, it's because I'm passionate about my opinion a bit. I'm a mentor, remember? So I can't hate anything apart from bad wine.
You're allowed to hate that.
Yeah. So what was I saying? All right. Okay. Yeah. So, and I don't like the idea of squatted running. I don't like the idea of squatted running, because if we're looking at two ends of the spectrum, it just exists in the middle. It's a step, like it's a step and hip displacement level relative to the ground on the path to find high gears. It's a consequential effect. It's like the hip lock stuff. It's a consequential effect of ground reaction. So don't train it, leave it alone. Work to get length. And when I talk about, and this is again like how you build, how I take an athlete from acceleration to max velocity, as I say, first of all, keep separating your hip from your foot and the angle that you want to go until your body brings you up. So that's how we'll then take, because if you keep whacking, because the idea is that you want to keep the grounds here, and you want to keep those hips as high, as far away as possible. And the reason being is so you can turn your legs round underneath your body. And so, and this is where it's so simple. It's like, if I get good enough length, or like, so the first 3 or 4 steps, you're kind of like, you're like really revving the momentum on the mass of the body. And then all of a sudden it's going, because it's Newton's first law, right? Inertia, and then second acceleration. So first step, second step, and then you're building. Once it's got speed, you need to keep it up there. So you need to get as much length away from it as possible, but you need to move your legs as fast as twice as fast as the way your hips are moving, and then keep it up there. And there's no point in forcing that relationship, because if you keep fighting for length, you'll find height, because it's just the other way around. It's just angular displacement, right? And so you're pushing it up as you get through. So, and then I talk to my guys a lot about acceleration curves and distribution of acceleration. And this is something I've not really seen anyone talk about, which I really want to like discuss this more with people, because to be fast at 10 or fast at 20 or time to 10, time to 20 they're brilliant, but they're still general to the game. Like your acceleration curve is dependent on the situation that's put in front of you. So within that density model, I'm like, right, I'll take a guy who taps out after 6 steps, and I need to teach him to accelerate through 20 steps. And that's another weak link in a more specific, a more advanced sprinter, in terms of team sports anyway. But then also like good track sprinters, they all just dive off at the end. So it's about understanding speed maintenance. So it's really interesting. If you take like a starter play in rugby, I always liken things to starter plays, because they're the best opportunities to fuck shit up pretty much. And being as a winger or an outside back, starter plays were amazing for me, because you just have to, if you're in the right place and the dominoes fall into place and you just hit the line at the right time, no one's stopping you, because it's physics. They're not going to stop you. How do you beat someone? Run faster than they can turn. Simple. That's like fundamental. So, but then you need to time your acceleration curve up to it. So you need to have a repertoire of trying to get to 9 meters per second inside 20, but then 9 meters per second inside 30, 40, 50. And then also like timing when you're finding your gear, and then how long you can hold your gear. So there's this whole next layer of specific conundrum within team sport programming, which, to be fair, I mean, at the moment, a lot of my latest work with guys is up in 10, pretty much. We call it up in 10. They're usually there by 8, and then we're just getting the top end. I mean, I had a girl, England Sevens girl. She did 21 mile an hour inside 12 steps.
What's that in either kilometers per hour or meters per second? I don't do miles per hour.
No, I had it off a speed gun, so she was like 9.5. I think it's about 9.5, something like that. But high nines inside 12 steps. So it was like exploring these curves and understanding, and that's where the autonomy to the athlete comes in. It's like, well, coach, why am I just doing 10-meter sprints when I'm a winger and I barely sprint for 10 meters ever? It's like, well, this is when the coach needs to give that autonomy. And also, like, I had a player, Howard Packman, he's my first guy over 10 meters per second, and he did that in a game, and he was a high leg turnover, high frequency guy, and so we had to, and a really poor lumbar pelvic tilt, and his goal was learning to stabilize the pelvis through all phases of gait, because it would top out and he kept getting hamstring injuries. And so for him it was like, so let's sit down, go through your tape. How do you score the most tries? In what scenarios do you score the most tries? Well, let's work on that. Or where do you find you do your best work? And and he came back and it was a cover tackle situation, 10.13 on catapult. So not stat sports. Stat sports aren't verified. Catapult are. But that's me being sassy. And so then it was, again, it's all those layers of context, and again it goes right back to the beginning. Give it back to your player. Give it back to the player. Let go of your ego, and you can build out the shoddiest program, but if the athlete believes in it, it's going to get better.
Maybe a recent example of what you're talking about, the acceleration curve. Caleb Clark comes to mind. Just watching the huge game that he did against Australia 2 weeks back, 3 weeks back. And when he scores like 2 or 4 tries, I forget, but you see him
up, didn't they?
You see him. It just seems like the other players are not ready for him to run that fast off his first 2 or 3 steps. He's so dynamic off his first step, second step, that guys that would usually catch any other player, they can't catch him. And then another one that always comes to mind is Bowden Barrett, when he decides to put his foot down because he sees a gap. Again, he knows that he's going to get through, and he usually does. Maybe they'll grab a short, but he usually is through.
Think about how intelligent that is, though.
Like the vision of the game, and then being like, okay, I know that by putting my foot down at that split second, I'm going to get through that specific gap that I just saw and that he didn't see because he's late on his defensive line and movement. It's pretty impressive.
And that's where S&C coaches just need to just sit back, and you can't take credit for that, because ultimately we're like specific generalists. So like you can, with the linear speed and stuff, you can improve every possibility that they have the ability to produce that speed, but they could be fucking terrible at the game and keep running into people and they'll never use it. So it's kind of like, that's the gap you can never close, but it's a gap that needs to be developed by technical coaches.
And that hence the there needs to be some kind of, if not communication, at least it's got to be transparent insofar as how this transfers over. Doesn't make sense. I want to come back to the acceleration curve you're talking about. I remember looking at a paper by Dan Clark that he did. You probably saw that one on the 40-meter dash in the NFL. It was from a few years back.
Yeah.
And from memory, I believe that, and correct me if I'm wrong on that, but essentially the acceleration curve, so the trend was very close, and it was pretty much always linked to max velocity. In very few cases was it not. So the higher your max velocity, the faster you accelerated, essentially. Or is it the slower you accelerated and then the faster the other way around? You topped out sooner. But to what extent can you change those dynamics? Because like you said, if you give a high level sprinter the autonomy to accelerate as long as he wants to, for as long as he wants to, he's going to take 50, 60 meters or plus. To what extent can you shorten that and say, I want you as fast as possible at 20 or at 30? Is it like physically, is it possible? And then what changes in the way that you run to achieve those higher velocities, but in shorter distances? You see what I mean? Does that make sense?
No, it does definitely. And that was a good paper. I mean, it basically it was just a linear trend. But the intersection where it started separating, I think, was under 10 meters. So it goes to show you how important the first 10 meters are, setting up the later sprint. And I'll probably change my mind on this, but I think that that it's all about gear management. So it's all about the ability to know, and I say this, is just run slower. Only access the potential you need to finish the situation. Right, speed reserve. But then if you take it, so then it's like, well, what happens next? So if a guy knows he needs to break 9 meters per second inside 20 meters to beat that situation, well, is he then going to keep getting faster? No. It's his ability to hold his speed for as long as he can. But usually, if you think about the game, when we bust and break that first line, there's two things that happen. You're either home free, and that's where tempo helps you to stay relaxed, or you make a decision, pass it. Like play rugby. Do you know what I mean?
Or you have to slow down to step or something.
Exactly. There is a resultant deceleration from some way. So and I always say, so I always take it back, well, think about this as actually like a full-blown track sprinter, 100-meter sprinter. Think about that. Can you change their distribution curve? Definitely, because you always want to raise the ceiling. Because I always take it back to track sprinting, because they're the best at running fast, and because everything else fits underneath. So you look at what they would do, look at what you would do in that situation. It's like, right, well then let's look at how do we find our phases in our sprinting throughout a race, and then see where and what the best combination of that is, and then start looking at the gaps in variance, then ask the question, why is that happening? And then you can start exploring. But I would take I would like to believe that I can take a rugby player and teach him to find 9 meters per second in about 20 meters, but also to find it in 40.
Right, and to have that ability to decide how you're going to accelerate and how soon you're gonna hit the top, essentially.
Yeah, because people say, when you put your foot down, that's terrible. Because when you put your foot down, your hips drop and you slow down. Like if you say that, like you'll be heavier, the hips will collapse, and you'll go slow. So it's about when you drop the gear. Like I like to say, drop a gear. When you drop from fourth to third to get up a hill. Like it's exactly that. It's like buying your time to find your gear, and then you won't get stopped.
I want to shift completely from our speed and acceleration talk to talk about, just to finish here today, Sam, free content, producing free content as a coach.
Oh, fuck. Excuse me. Yeah.
Yeah, I knew you liked that one. How much is too much? And what is the right balance between, putting good stuff out to help as many people as possible, establish your message, and then obviously through that, you will find people that will want to come back to you and buy your stuff. How do you balance those two out?
So it comes down to a couple of things. Like my perception, I've been enlightened recently by the amount of coaches that I've spoke to. And like in my mentorship, we use language like that all the time, because consciousness is a scale. And literally, like if you think about it, I've found a new level of consciousness. It's like opening a trapdoor in front of you, so you get the light on you. Really simple, because you understand something a bit better. So I spoke to well over, I think it was 120 coaches. I didn't get to speak to all of them, but throughout all those people, the biggest message that came back is that they were really afraid to voice their opinion on social media or demonstrate what they want to achieve, like demonstrate what they're doing, because they're afraid. Like they're really afraid of being shot down or judged. And that's terrifying. And I even spoke to one coach who was so afraid of being judged that he stopped writing training programs. And it's because of the example set by the upper echelons of coaches on social media, where they're very difficult conversations, because I personally, in terms of content, if I keep it like, that's one thing that I will that will always stay with me, is that if people are being negatively affected by your conversation on social media, then your social media has to change if you want to better yourself and B, the industry. You want to create a positive shift, because essentially, why do we post content? We post content for attention, and we don't want negative attention, because if you create an enemy out of someone to show that you are valuable, then you are no more valuable than your enemy. How'd you fucking like that? So this is like these are these rules that I've been building like over the last sort of 6 to 8 months. I'm basically trying to take what I do in my personal life and the rules, and I put them on my social media, because you can't, in terms of how much content is enough. Like I open journaled on a Friday for a year about certain things on my Fuck It Fridays, and that, like, for me, was that type of stuff was enough for a week. But then in terms of the type of content you want to deliver, it's very, very challenging, because like the Gary Vee stuff, where he's like 4 different things, 4 different ways, you just can't do it as a coach. But what you need to do, in terms of, first and foremost, have a clear idea of what you stand for as a coach and what message you want to send and your goal. And again, it comes full circle about knowing who you are, because you're not going to be able to produce content like Gary Vee, or you're not going to be able to produce. I can't produce your content, you can't produce my content, with different people. So if we take that notion, then there's no competition. So there, I mean, if you want to like really throw it off, you produce as much as you like, because if your intention is pure and your message is kind, then there can't be too much of it. If you're trying to create content that provokes a thought process, then just be careful how you message it. If you look to incite negativity or evoke an emotive reaction, then your motives are wrong. because you aren't helping anyone. What you are doing is projecting your own fears, and that's huge for me, which you see loads of it on strength and conditioning social media. The person that shouts the loudest is the most afraid. And it's so true. And these rules, it's funny, like a lot of these rules, I'm really introspective. I've got my own therapist, like my non-negotiables for my whole performance program. So I spend a lot of time deconstructing this stuff and analyzing it just to make my life easier so I don't get headaches. And so when you start thinking about it, it's like, well, fuck. Yeah, you can start seeing, well, fuck, he doesn't like his job, really, does he? His boss has pissed him off today. And because I'm in a very fortunate position where I'm in at the moment. But so then when you talk about like how you want to put your message across, and I mean, I posted something today, talked about like the MAS thing. And I was like, it was the first time I'd actually like really been negatively approached on social media. And it was like, wow, this is fucking crazy. And I was basically just saying that MAS is a general physical tool for team sports, and I don't use it, but this is what I use that could help. So offer a solution. Fundamentally, always offer a solution, because you're just pointing at problems. You are the problem. And so I was like, fuck. Like our industry, combined with all these conversations, our industry just is so afraid, and they're so afraid to be wrong. But if we actually boil it all back down, we're producing content. A couple of people, I produce content because I want to help people, but I also want to make money. There's nothing wrong with saying that. Like I give so much away, because I'm a massive believer in karma. And this is why we have these conversations and everything. I want to give as much value as possible, because someone may not be able to financially invest. Someone may not have the confidence to even ask if they can have a phone call with me. Someone may not like be sat and they'll be listening to this thinking, fuck, like I've not posted in ages. I've second guessed every program decision that I've made. And so if you can put something that speaks to someone's internal dialogue, then you're going to create monumental shifts. And that's not monetary, because at that time, then that person will come back 100%. Like I spoke to coaches. I spoke to a guy that had been kicked out of his rugby team, professional rugby player, lost his contract, had no money, had to move home, had a barbell set. I fucking gave him one of my programs. I was like, mate, there is no point you forking out more money right now. There is no point. Have one of my template programs. It's fucking on me. Get yourself a contract. Next off season, come back, and then you can pay me. Because if your best intention is to move the needle forward, he'll come back. And if he doesn't, fuck him.
I love it. I want to finish with a question that we got from the Instagram.
I'm joking about that end bit. Yeah.
Finish with the question from Instagram. Dan asks, what happened with London Scottish this year?
So in a nutshell, I made the choice that the juice wasn't worth the squeeze, put it that way. I was misinformed about up until the first training session, everything was how it was meant to be. And then as soon as the first session happened, I got challenged. Players aren't working hard enough. First meeting, there was meant to be a meeting after training, and I went home. It was like 9:30 at night. They were called back. You coming for this meeting? Didn't even know we had it. You coming back? No, I'm going home. Like, no. And so there was just a cascade of events that were impacting me more than feeding me. And it was an opportunity. I took the role on as an opportunity, and I'd worked for 2 weeks and I still didn't have a contract. And from a professional point of view, that was unacceptable. I gave them the benefit of the doubt because I was excited about the opportunity that was in front of me. But then I also realized I had a massive responsibility, not only to my own sanity, but to the people who I work with to help them understand the role of coaching in their life rather than their life as a coach. And it was one of the easiest decisions I've ever had to make. It was shit, I'm not going to lie, but you know, when it's clear as day that things are not going to be as you were told, then you best serve yourself by not being there.
And that goes straight back to the beginning of the conversation where, you know thyself, and then make sure that whatever you put yourself through is aligned with your own values and what you're, trying to get out of it or trying to put in, so that you don't get disappointed somewhere along the way. And like you said, if you have the freedom and the opportunity to cut ties early and not get roped into sunken cost fallacies and all that kind of stuff, and I've been here for a while, so I'm just going to stay a little bit longer, then you're better off just sticking to your own, just be honest with yourself and then get out when it's time.
Yeah, and I'll say this to like anyone listening as well, and it's really, really important. Like, we need to stop living in this notion of valiant poverty, like, and stop being like, oh, I love my job and I live in a fucking shoebox. Like, that is wrong. That is like, go back, look at psychological attachment theories and associative learning and stuff like that is wrong. Like, because at the end of the day, you will create a devalue of yourself, and then you will devalue the external relationships in your life, and then you will lose them. And I've resigned from my first job. I got fired from my second job, walked out of my third, and I'm the happiest I've ever been. In my first job, I lost a long-term girlfriend. Second job didn't go quite well because I was sacrificing too much on the way. And third job, I'm in the fucking driving seat now, and it's okay that I don't work for a professional club. I got enticed by it, and it just showed me, it was another lesson to show me that the vision and the bigger picture is purer. And so that's what that'll be. And if you want to create change, you don't change it from inside.
I love that, Sam. Thanks so much for coming back on today. Just a reminder for all the listeners, Sam's been kind enough to set up a little discount code for the Upside Strength podcast community. So go use Upside at checkout on Sam's shop. All the links will be in the description. So go check out his awesome programs, his mentorship that's going on right now. Mike, Sam, do you have anything else to plug as we finish here?
No, I mean, the mentorship's closed at the moment. There's a wait list where I send out a few things. I have an ebook, a free download that is basically 3 simple strategies to help you clear your mind. With my journey of personal development and my therapy journey, I found some things really useful. And I'm quite outspoken about it because I think there needs to be more of it. It's one of the most powerful things that I've ever done in my life, and there's no coincidence that I'm in the best place I've ever been. So 3 simple strategies to clear your mind is available. And there's a mentorship wait list as well that I'll send out a load of free goodies on as well. So
awesome.
That's it. Thank you so much for having me on. I really enjoyed it, man.
No, it's great. And I'll link all of those in the description in the show notes for those who are interested. And be well. I'll talk to you soon.
Cheers, bro. Take care.